So welcome to today's webinar, Modernizing Your Payroll to Grow Your Business, sponsored and presented by Zeal. My name is Amy Horvat. I'm a research analyst here at SIA, and I'll be your host for today's presentation. In this session, we're going to discuss how modern payroll solutions can help grow your business in today's changing world with different workers and work needs. Before we get started, a brief word about logistics. There are two ways to listen to the webinar, via your computer or a dial-in. If you need assistance, send us a message through Q&A, and our WebEx producer is standing by to help. Or you can reach out to member services at the email shown on this screen. We do plan to make time for Q&A at the end of today's session. Feel free to enter questions into the chat anytime throughout the webinar. And if for some reason we run out of time to answer your question, we will respond directly within a few days of the webinar. As a reminder, we are recording for today's presentation. Audio and slides will be available about 48 hours after the webinar. Keep your eye on your email. This is a question we get a lot. A little bit about SIA, where we make the world of work better. SIA informs, connects, and elevates the workforce solutions ecosystem. As many of you know already, SIA is the global advisor for staffing and workforce solutions. We offer a range of research and advisory, events, editorial products, and certification and training for staffing firms and users. Wanted to highlight one of our upcoming events, which is our collaboration in the Gig Economy Conference, where tech, talent, and suppliers converge. It is open to all staffing executives, suppliers, and investors, and it's happening just next month at the Omni Hotel in Dallas, Texas. If you haven't already, I highly recommend looking into registering. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. So our first speaker is Kirti Shenoy, who is the CEO and co-founder of Zeal, a leading modern payroll platform for staffing firms. Under her leadership, Zeal has raised over $30 million from investors like Spark Capital and Y Combinator. Kirti also serves as on the American Payroll Association's Digital Payments Committee, where she works with policymakers on innovative initiatives such as EWA and digital payment legislation. Prior to Zeal, Kirti developed white label banking products at Bank Mobile. Thanks for joining us, Kirti.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to have this conversation today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirti, and I used to own and operate my very own staffing company, had around 1,000 workers when we were at peak scale, and I really found a lot of the compliance and payment problems in the staffing industry to be quite interesting, and that really led me to create Zeal. So really looking forward to today's conversation.
We're really happy to have you. I'd also like to introduce our second speaker, who is Kevin O'Neill, the Technology Research Director here at SIA, where he covers software across the front, middle, and back office operations, including payroll, all software used by companies across the global staffing sector. Before joining SIA, Kevin held a number of senior IT roles within the staffing industry, including as the Chief Information Officer for Randstad Australasia and as Head of Delivery for the APAC region for Randstad as well. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, really privileged to be able to be in this conversation and along with Kirti from Zeal. I also had the privilege previously of managing a payroll department during a technology transition. So really excited to be able to talk about payroll in this context. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
So with that, I think we should get right into it. I'm really excited Kirti and Kevin are here to discuss our main topic, which is modernizing payroll. So I wanted to set the stage for the conversation before we really get into it by talking about why this is such an important conversation to be having right now. And part of that is that coming out of the pandemic, what we've really seen is that there's just a whole scale rethinking about work, and there's a lot more interest in flexibility. And of course, when we talk about flexibility, the first thing that pops into everyone's mind tends to be remote work. And we do see that remote work is more common among temporary workers than it used to be. In fact, results of our 2023 staffing company survey show that remote work is 5 times more common among temporary workers now than it was in 2019 before the pandemic, when only about 2% of temps were working remotely. Now that level is 10%. And it seems like this level of 10% is expected to be the new normal, with companies predicting it will remain at this level for at least the next 5 years. So remote work is definitely not going away. And this is a big opportunity for staffing firms because it makes it easier to find workers to fill hard to fill roles. But in order to capitalize on the opportunity, you do need to have the technology infrastructure in place to be able to support these workers. Another way to think about flexibility is in terms of how workers are working. And I think when we talk about flexibility, a lot of people assume that this change is being driven by the workers themselves. But it's important, I think, to understand that it's also being driven by buyers of contingent work who are expressing more interest in having a flexible workforce than ever before. So shown here are the results of our 2023 Workforce Solutions Buyer Survey, which show that enterprise buyers are using and they plan to use more contingent work than they ever have before, with respondents projecting that the average percent of workforce that is contingent will rise from 23% to 28% over the next decade. And another change happening now and always, really, if we're being honest, is compliance, which are, changing and intensifying. And when we talk about compliance, we're talking about everything from I-9 verification to healthcare insurance to termination rules to overtime and minimum wage laws. And of course, these keep changing and they vary broadly from state to state, which has always been true. But this becomes even more important when you have a workforce set with more remote and flexible work happening. And you can see here, there always seems to be some new headline about a company that has failed to keep up with this change. And you can see that there's hefty price tags that can be associated with that failure. So having the right technology in place to easily and quickly adapt to this can help mitigate that risk. So work has changed and workers are also changing. And one way this is showing up is the quickly expanding use of staffing and talent platforms and other technology, which are playing a key role in not allowing some of this remote work to happen. So as you can see in the chart here, the global market for B2B talent platforms has more than doubled over the last 5 years, and use of these platforms is expected to continue growing at a steady clip. There's also a lot of convergence happening between staffing platforms and talent platforms. And in this year's survey of global talent platform providers, which was published just about 2 weeks ago, we found that about half of all talent platforms support temporary work arrangements, half support SOW contractors, and a little bit over a third support permanent employees as well. So workers who are using these platforms have access to a wide range of employment opportunities, but only if the companies can have the technology to support them in all these different modalities. And rising use of platforms is really a sign of how modern workers expect to have everything literally at their fingertips on their phones. This extends to their pay. Earned wage access, daily pay, and on-demand pay can be difficult for staffing companies to offer because of how money's flowing in and out. But in a tight labor market, wage access can be a key differentiator that gives you an advantage to draw workers to you. And having the right payroll software for that is critical. So that brings us to the key topic in hand. And I wanted to take this moment to pass it over to Kirti, because I know that this is a factor that you talk about as helping influence your decision to launch Zeal. So how have you seen these factors impacting payroll?
Totally. I think the overall trend is that workers are just expecting a more digitally native experience. And this really started with the rise of technology companies like Uber coming into the market. Workers are expected to sign up for shifts dynamically, view their payments dynamically, self-serve and self-support themselves. So we're starting to see more and more staffing companies, again, try to keep up with what the workers really want and are craving for, which is that digitally native experience related to their payments.
Perfect. And Kevin, with all of this change happening in the workforce, I assume that your research is showing that payroll has been keeping up?
Yes and no. I think if you looked at some of the headlines that you just showed, it would be reasonable to conclude that payroll's falling behind a little bit with compliance, and and accuracy in some cases because it's such a dynamic environment. The truth is probably a couple of factors at play. I think governments are becoming more prescriptive about payroll accuracy and making sure that staffing companies meet their obligations. So that increases some risk. And I think as Kirthi points out, and you also, the modern worker is wants things that are there straight away. The immediacy, the transparency, and everything is really is really important to them. We took a look at staffing companies' opinions on their technology, and it was interesting to look at how they viewed their back office and payroll, and it got an NPS score of -20. This is in our recent staffing company survey. So the current systems are not kind of universally positively viewed, and they're functional, but I'd say they're not 100% innovative. And why is that? Because probably the staffing industry it's not tech driven or mobile first. Usually it's primarily a people business, and you can have a look at this slide. So companies typically allocate 3 to 5% of the revenue for IT expenses, but staffing firms really a little bit below that. So the investment isn't already there. And I think also staffing firms, a lot of investment with the rise of recruitment technology has really been going into the rec tech, the front office. So there's still lots of legacy in the back office, I think, and you might find that there's systems there that have been in place for 10, 15, and 20 years. Well, the process is not always fully digitalized. It's kind of batch driven rather than always real time. One of our more recent surveys did show that staffing companies are only 20% are going to be spending more on their back office, whereas they're spending 54% are spending more on sourcing automation and 52% more on analytics. But I think certainly from my conversations with staffing firms and briefings, they're really starting to focus on payroll. There's a growing awareness that it can give you a competitive advantage, and it can make a difference by lowering cost and leveraging some of the new technology that Kirti will certainly talk about. So I think it's probably been a little bit behind, but certainly it is changing, and staffing firms are starting to focus on how they can get better value from their payroll component.
That's really insightful, Kevin. And when you're talking about the investment that they're putting in, you said it's maybe a little bit under what some other companies are. And it looks like here, even when that investment's happening, more of it's going to run and kind of regular process improvements and really transforming the operations.
Yeah, that's right. So the running of a tech stack tends to take the focus, and staffing firms, we talk a little bit about that later, need to be able to move that investment around as technology changes. And I guess say Kirti will certainly look to tap into how to show companies how they can change their technology and change their investment in technology, particularly in the back office.
Yep. And I think, Kirti, I'm really curious to kind of round out this discussion because I think it's really revealing when companies come to you, what challenges are they looking to solve?
Absolutely, Amy. I actually have the privilege of chatting with hundreds of new staffing companies each and every year. And I think it really comes down to these 4 core themes that I see constantly in my conversations. First off is scaling. All of us, when I had a staffing business, all the staffing business owners that I talked to, we all want to scale our business. We want to expand into new territories, work with new clients, and continue to scale our business. But how do we do that without scaling our headcount? And the way that you do that is really by investing and sorting through tools that help you to scale your business so that you can increase revenue, increase that profit without increasing your headcount. So that's a theme I talk about a lot. The second is flexibility. In the staffing industry, the number one thing that your clients need to see from you is flexibility. You might tell your clients, have your timesheets in by Tuesday at 9 a.m. and Tuesday at 9 a.m. rolls around and your customers are panicking. They're trying to get their time approved. They're trying to get in contact with that worker to validate something. And you need to roll with the punches. You need to be able to have not only the operational process, but also the tools so that you can deal with your customers' challenges and be that flexible provider so that you can keep winning more clients, keep retaining those clients. And again, tech can be a really, really great way for you to roll with those punches. The third is compliance. I'm really passionate about compliance, of course, because I run a payroll company. And for those of you who don't know, already in the United States of America, we have 11,000 tax jurisdictions. And these jurisdictions are governing themselves. They each have their own way of doing filings. They each have their own way of accepting payments. And they each are proposing new legislation each and every week for changes. So what I've been seeing in the market, especially as a payroll and HR service provider, is almost every week we have a new jurisdiction coming out with new changes to minimum wage, overtime compliance, accruals, which is in and of itself a challenge. We're starting to see statewide initiatives to push employers, especially staffing companies, to provide health insurance, 401k, even if it's a basic plan with very minimal contribution or even no contribution. The states want to have this program for workers, especially temp workers, as they see more workers entering this side of the market. And then last but not least, I'm talking a lot about I-9 with several staffing companies because several states have requirements for now E-Verify. Which has posed a lot of compliance challenges for staffing companies. I see staffing companies all the time get penalized for not having proper record keeping of I-9, employing workers that weren't really qualified to work in the U.S. So this is a new compliance theme that I start to see and start to talk about a lot with staffing companies. And then last but not least, the biggest challenge for staffing companies, I think, is, worker retention. And I can't think of a better way to improve worker retention than to improve the process that the workers care most about, which is getting paid and getting paid on time, getting paid with transparency, accessing their pay stubs, and knowing all the ins and outs of that. So what I talk to staffing companies about is thinking about developing a product and a program that really makes their good workers excited to keep taking more and more shifts with them, and think about upgrading that process so that worker feels excited to have loyalty to your brand. And I think I might have read on SIA or maybe on another forum, most temp workers are really in the market taking 2 to 4 different jobs. So we want to think about how do you bring that brand loyalty and keep these workers on your platform, especially the good ones.
Great. Thank you, Kirti. So I think that, you've really covered kind of all the bases there and added some color to this general conversation we've been having about changing work and changing workers. So we've seen that there's problems, and now we're here to talk about solutions, which I think is the exciting part. So Kirti, I want to pass it back to you and ask you, can you walk us through kind of an example of how implementing one solution, which is to modernize your payroll, can really help mitigate this broad spectrum of challenges that we've been talking about?
Absolutely. I have kind of gathered together a couple examples of sort of the new status of work and really excited to go over those. To dive right into the first example, I've created this example of what I think the new normal of work really is today. And the new normal of work is you may have an hourly worker that onboarded this week that's already taking on jobs with multiple clients. Of yours in a particular week. That worker might be taking on shifts across multiple locations in a particular week. They may accept shifts at different price ranges. You might want to pay them different price ranges depending on what you've negotiated with your clients. This is the new normal of work. It's no longer, one worker working for one of your clients. It's your good workers being deployed, working for several clients and taking on those opportunities, and for you to really activate them. The problem really in this circumstance is how are payroll admins and operational teams supposed to keep up with overtime requirements, especially when a worker might be working across different jurisdictions and states? How are payroll admins and operational staff supposed to know how to tax workers when they're working maybe in different states in a particular week? How are operational folks and payroll admins detecting whether or not a worker qualifies for overtime, whether they're meeting the minimum wage requirements over a week? The list sort of goes on and on and on. And the reality is, with workers wanting to get paid faster than ever, there's really no way for admins to keep up with keeping all of these calculations in their brain, working in spreadsheets, editing all of that, and doing that compliantly. And also, by the way, paying out these workers on a weekly basis. It's just not going to be possible. If we move on to maybe the next slide, I can show you a visual of what this may look like for your workers. You know, we have some staffing companies where workers will take shift just a couple miles away from each other. But as you all know, especially if you work in, you know, the payroll industry, each jurisdiction, each state comes with their own tax, their own set of compliance requirements, and it's really important to get it right. So what I think I like to introduce to staffing companies is, you know, editing thousands of shifts and keeping those rules in your brain and keeping up with those compliance requirements and having that all in your head and doing those calculations does not have to be the normal. There are new payment service providers, and we think that that should be the status quo for modern payroll today, to keep these compliance requirements in mind and really automate those processes for you so you can have peace of mind and really focus on scaling your business opportunities rather than, you know, spending a lot of time in menial ops. So this is something that a modern payroll provider can really do for you. They can automate your overtime, your sick leave accruals, your minimum wage. They could automate taxation and how you should tax workers based on the work locations that they're working in. And they can take that all off your plate so that you don't need to keep that, you know, in your brain and keep working in spreadsheets. So this is a great example that I like to show staffing companies of the impact of modern payroll. Another example of a trend, if we kind of move on to the next slide, that I'm seeing staffing companies invest in is really leaning into that digital experience for their workers. I think the staffing industry has made so much progress on moving off of pen and paper and onto these more digital processes. I've seen this across recruiting, offer letters, onboarding, and today I wanted to highlight onto one process that I'm talking to a lot of staffing companies about, which is I-9. And I will say, you know, in this day and age, staffing companies are still very, very behind on modernizing their I-9 process. Most of us are doing our I-9 employment eligibility in person. We're literally inviting the worker to come into a branch, bring your IDs, you're scanning, you're reviewing those IDs, you're making them sign the paperwork in person. That's something that staffing companies are doing right now. Other staffing companies are maybe sending their workers to the work site directly with their paperwork. Maybe they do or don't bring that paperwork at the work site. Other staffing companies are trying to do things via video webinars. And we think that there are better, more remote, optimized solutions for I-9, and that's something that Zeal has really created. If we move on to the next slide, our sort of take on I-9 is that it should be remote, it should be mobile friendly, and it should have e-verify so that you can keep up with those state compliance rules. So something that we've done on the worker side is we've really built out a very streamlined I-9 process where we can showcase the users, you know, all the different documents that they can submit to meet that I-9 compliance. We can OCR the images and ensure that those pieces of documentation are compliant. We can have them fill out that Form I-9. And then we do something sort of really special, which is we have the worker assign a remote authorized representative that can really attest under penalty and perjury that this worker is who they say they are. And that person doesn't actually have to be the employer. It could be their spouse. It could be anyone that the employer really authorizes to serve in that capacity. And if we move on to the next slide, what this could look like is a worker just assigning and saying, hey, I'm going to have my spouse or my neighbor you know, do the part B of my I-9 process. They get a text message, and all that person has to do is look at the documents, make sure the person is who they say they are, sign the document, and then the part B of the I-9 is complete. And then at least at Zeal, we take that one step further for our clients that want to have e-verify. We will directly report every single I-9 to the Department of Homeland Security, ensuring that we are helping our staffing companies with utmost compliance. But kind of for those of you who have done I-9, you know that this could be a multi-day process. You know this could be the thing that's holding you back from having this worker activated into the workforce. What we've really done is we've helped our customers bring this experience to mobile, via text, via email, however you want to do it in a more digitally native experience. But we've helped them bring this process to really a 5 to 10 minute process instead of a 5 to 10 day process, which is sometimes what I-9 really entails. So I-9, I think this is another theme that I'm really excited to see staffing companies lean into as they get more digitally native. If we move on to the next slide, Couple other themes that I just wanted to briefly touch upon is automation in payroll. I talk to staffing companies across the stack that are using tons of different payroll solutions. But if you didn't know already, there are tons of modern payroll solutions that can really help you to automate everything from new hire reporting, garnishments, tax filings, tax reporting, tax payments, net payments. You don't need to be registering with every tax agency and submitting those filings and tax payments yourselves. You don't need to reconcile those accounts yourselves. You can really upgrade onto these more modern software providers that are built to take that sort of off your plate. And you really, I think, with some of these more modern payroll providers like Zeal, can start to automate how the data comes in and how the data comes out. Do you want to start investing a little bit in moving from manual data entry into CSV upload? Do you want to automate from CSV to programmatically sending data from your ATS to your payroll? What are the themes that you want to start thinking about in terms of data ingestion? On the worker side and improving the worker experience, if we move on to the next slide, we're starting to see staffing companies really invest in having that brand loyalty with their workers and bringing that experience to a more digitally native experience. This could be staffing companies investing in building out mobile apps or web-based portals for their workers. We make this super easy for our users by having out-of-box components or pre-developed white-labeled mobile apps. But what I love about the mobile app and what I love about this visual, if you look at that fourth sort of mock-up of the payroll dashboard, is that the worker is really empowered to self-serve themselves. They can go ahead and say, hey, I got married, I'm going to update that account. I switched bank accounts, I'm going to update that account. They are really empowered to take that self-serve approach to supporting themselves instead of calling a payroll manager, emailing the payroll manager, figuring out how to manage the 5 third-party portals that you onboarded to. We're really creating a simpler experience for this worker and keeping everything on one consolidated system so that they have that peace of mind and can really self-serve themselves. So those are a couple of themes. That's kind of the magic of what I'm seeing in this, modern day and age in 2024, what the market has really brought to staffing companies, and I think it's really exciting. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I am sorry about that. I didn't want to interrupt until you were
No, you're
done.
good. You're good.
But that was, I mean, that was wonderful deep dive into, a lot of the different facets of this and all the benefits. So I think those details are really great. While you were talking, we did get a question come up that I think we should answer right now, which is just a little bit of clarification on if Zeal is a global or a US solution.
Yep, we are just in the US right now. That's our specialty, but definitely have partners for global if you want to reach out to us about that.
Okay. And that's helpful clarification. And I do want to, pass it over to Kevin. So Kevin, I know you do, as part of your research, review of a lot of different technology providers and a lot of their solutions. So I think having gone through this like really in-depth, detailed solution, I think it's also helpful to step back a little bit. And I'm hoping you can give us some perspective on how common these types of solutions are in the marketplace out there.
Yeah, Ken. Firstly, I think Curdy explained that really, really well. I mean, payroll's a very admin-heavy process and very process-driven, and if you can apply automation to that process, you get huge advantages, and those advantages are very obvious in cost savings and also satisfaction from the end user. So great to see. I write the global landscape reports on front, middle, and back office technology, and I ask vendors to rate their solutions. And the back office covers things like time and attendance, rates management, calculations, payroll, billing, and I think there are good solutions that cover the required functionality, and there's lots of good point solutions for TNA, and there's end-to-end systems that have very serviceable payroll and billing components. So they're reasonably common in the market. What's not common, I think, are new systems with and new payroll systems with contemporary architecture, that cater for more complex parts of the workflow, such as payroll, and that they've been developed recently, so they've got better UI components, they've got better automation, they can leverage AI, and they've been developed with more recent tools and so with a mobile first approach, for example. So so you need to be, it's bringing the modern technology to payroll. I think that's been a little bit slow, but now, there's some systems in the market that are doing this. And I think the main reason why it hasn't been very common is, it takes a lot of time and investment and knowledge to develop a back office solution, particular payroll, with all the kind of mobile and self-service components and all the calculation components. And I'd have to take my hat off to people like Curdy and Zeal, who've actually gone through this process, because I would think it would take something like 4 years to build, test, and commercialize something like this. So would that be? Does that sound about right, Curdy?
Something
In
like
terms of
that,
time frame?
We've, at our team, just from the tech development side, we've worked with so many amazing engineers that have worked at pretty much every payroll company. A lot of our investors are investors from all the major giant payroll companies, and they've really invested in us with their time and resources because they want to see something modern into the market. And that's what I want to see. I think we have made the transition from on-premise payroll to cloud-based payroll relatively slowly, but kind of quickly in the grand scheme of things. And now I think we're taking cloud-based payroll and, manual data entry, manual CSVs, and we're trying to do something different, which is, can we get everything on mobile? Can we get everything on branded worker portals on web where, we have this more native product experience? I think that's really exciting. Like, every staffing company really does have the opportunity to have their own little Uber, if they partner with the right tools. And I'm really excited about that future.
Yeah, look, that's a great point, and I forgot to mention that moving from on-premise to cloud, probably finance systems and payroll billing systems have been the last ones to make that leap, and the benefits you get from a cloud-based payroll and financial systems are really incredible. So yeah, it's a great point that yes, it's happened, but it's been a bit slow in comparison to some of the other systems that have been cloud-based for multiple years. But what I would point out is not all, only more modern systems are cloud native. So some have been ported to the cloud, but they still have a lot of old technology. But the modern systems have been developed with the cloud in mind, so you can leverage a lot more benefit from cloud technology if they're cloud native solutions.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, this is really great insight. And I think it's time to transition to the question that some of our audience are probably wondering, which is, how to implement this. And, I think it's important to talk about, we talked about tech investment a little bit, that, this is not going to happen in a vacuum. So if you're looking to update your payroll solution, it's happening, it's going to happen in terms of the broader business. And so, Kevin, I wanted to turn it over to you and just kind of have you talk a little bit about some considerations that staffing firms will need to take into account when they're looking to update their payroll solution.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to note that payroll touches each part of the stack. So, it takes inputs from TNA, it's master data from a front office system, it's got mobile apps for TNA on outputs. So, it's part of it's clear from the side it's much more complex than just taking a simple CSV file, and that's been the traditional way of looking at it. I think APIs and integration are so much better in modern payroll, so it's so much easier to kind of click the payroll in and take the outputs and inputs from the different parts of the system. But I think you need to be aware of that. And it's also moving, if you want to deliver, real-time pay, it's moving from a kind of batch-driven approach to a real-time approach to be able to deliver daily pays, for example. But that gives you great advantages of, analytics, and you can leverage more with some of the new developments in AI. But, getting to the modern systems make it easy, but getting to easy takes some preparation. And I think we asked back office vendors in 2023, what are the best practices for implementing new solutions? And, universally, they told us that having a really solid tech roadmap with, your current state, the future state, and all the steps you need to get to the future state. And there's a lot of boring stuff in there that IT guys seem to love. That having process documentation and requirements, understanding your data, and they're all really important. And I think you know staffing companies really need to look at modernizing their processes rather than just replacing their payroll system. So it might be part of a digital transformation component. Sticking a modern payroll system into an aging tech stack and aging processes is not always going to give you your competitive advantage. So I guess getting out in front, don't be a laggard. The time now is to really look at improving technology because of the environment we're in. Making use of real-time data that comes from that modern payroll and automating what makes sense. But you don't necessarily need to automate everything, but certainly the opportunities lie in automation right across the board in payroll. But you can only really do that, I think, if the foundations of the tech stack are solid. So having that enterprise architecture in place and knowing where you want to get to and having really good solid foundations. And of course, one of the reasons for doing that is you've got a lot of security issues, particularly with regards to payroll. You store a lot of information that's that's ripe for pickings for cyber criminals, and also for fraud in payroll is something that you've got to be aware of and protect against. So I think following the innovation that's around and the research and really having clear goals about what you're trying to achieve. And I think one of the key things too, is selecting the right partner. So making sure that if you are taking a leap into modern payroll, that you're really looking at the companies that are available that do this, and making sure that you're partnering with people that really understand your business and understand the technology and how it applies to the problems that you have. So I think that those are some of the things that that staffing companies need to take into account. And yeah, there's a few boring bits and pieces in there that will appeal to both the payroll folks and the IT folks.
Thanks, Kevin. So flipping this around, Kirti, and looking at it from the payroll side, if companies are looking to implement this, how can you help work with them depending on what they already have in place?
Absolutely. So wanted to kind of have a couple slides just on two models of staffing companies. So hopefully we could speak to everyone in the crowd here. Model one staffing company is a staffing company that maybe has a little bit of technical resources, whether you have some sort of an in-house IT department, or maybe you have a really good tech developer or tech agency that you rely on for things. If you want to continue to invest in scalability, flexibility, and compliance, I really look at it as two things. One is, how are you streamlining your data processes? And what we're seeing tech-enabled companies do, especially with tooling like Zeal, is to really programmatically send us that data via an API. Route us all the data from your ATS, your CRM, your accounting system, route all that information, timekeeping, route all the information via API to your payroll system. Partner with the payroll system that can really automate all the things that we quite frankly should have already automated over a decade ago: the gross to nets, the tax filings, the tax management, the child support, everything in between. Partner with someone that's going to take that data and automate the rest for you. And then last but not least, thinking about that last side that I talked about, worker retention, think about how you are going to consolidate those dashboards and those portals for your users, whether that is getting your users on a web-based portal, which you can build with our API, with our UI components, or building out, a mobile experience for your workers where they're downloading an app and again, viewing that same data that you are transmitting via using our UI components and API. So that's a solution for the tech-enabled vendors. If you're tech-enabled and you're ready to upgrade, we'd love to chat about how we can consolidate your data and how we can bring that worker portal experience to you. For the next slide, we have, an option for companies, staffing companies that know they want to invest in tech, but don't have any in-house technical resources, maybe don't have a tech developer, but just want to get started on doing something to upgrade their stack. So again, it's the same framework, thinking about how we're doing data ingestion. Something that we've really invested in over the past year is smart CSV imports, because we know that admins and operational folks are spending all their time in uploading CSVs, downloading CSVs, but we've done some really cool innovation on smart CSV with AI, such that we can make that process just a little bit easier for you. You can get that data into our system in a more streamlined way. We're still going to do the same things, automating the tax filings, automating the payments, automating everything in between. And then we've launched something really special for our less tech-enabled staffing companies, and that is pre-developed white-labeled mobile applications, which will include onboarding, pay stubs, I-9, pay history, an employee dashboard, everything that you would want in order to build that sort of digital native worker experience. We are now doing white labeled apps for our customers, putting it with your logo, your branding, getting that into the iOS and Android app stores, and allowing you to bring that experience to your users. So there really is a solution for everyone, whether you're tech enabled and you want to do more of that in-house, whether you're less tech enabled and you want to work with a provider that meets you where you are and will get you that native experience without changing too much in your operational process. So yeah, would love to chat with anyone, of course, here if you want any feedback or advice, or want to chat about how to just continue to invest in modernizing payroll, because there's something for everyone.
Thanks, Kirti. So just to summarize real quickly, there's a lot of benefits, lower operational costs, access to new geographies with unique tax reporting and compliance requirements, retaining employees, enabling new types of arrangements, ensuring compliance, of course, and leveraging data. So at this point, it is time for your questions. So I want to go ahead and transfer over to Q&A. I have a couple coming in. Please feel free to enter them in the chat if you have anything you'd like us to discuss. So the first question that I have here is, and I think it's probably directed at you, Kirti, if you have a solution for automating verification of secret clearance, or potentially getting an employee through the secret clearance process.
Oh, that's a really great question. I don't know if we have quite a solution for that quite yet. Would have to learn a little bit more to see if there's any tooling that we could do to increase automation, but haven't necessarily worked through that use case quite yet.
Kevin, have you seen anything about solutions along those lines?
I've seen point solutions, but I haven't seen anything that's kind of wrapped up in the in that whole kind of payroll and administration side of things. So no, it's something quite new.
Very
One thing I
interesting.
will flag, though, that we have worked on, and this might not be fully applicable for just secret clearance, but might be applicable for any staffing company that has clients where their clients want end users to sign a multitude of different documents, waivers, NDAs, etc. And we've actually built a digitally native paperwork collection product. So you can upload your own contracts, your own waivers, your own forms, and collect compliant e-signature just like you would via like a HelloSign, Dropbox Sign style product. And we have brought that in-house so that you can do that contract paperwork collection management. So that might be applicable for this industry for some parts of that flow. So wanted to call it out.
Gotcha. Perfect. So how can companies connect their ATS to the payroll system?
That's a great question. So we at Zeal, we have like automated ATS integrations with some of the most popular ATSs sort of out there in the market. We have them listed on our website. What we've done is we've worked with these ATSs and we've built a bidirectional integration such that the ATS can really export data into the payroll without you needing to do something. So what this could look like is, if we have an integration with your ATS or a future integration with your ATS, the workers would automatically be created in the payroll system, and you could automatically send those workers emails to onboard them onto your payroll solution. So we've done that via an API integration and are always looking forward to partnering with more and more ATSs. Other than that, if we're not integrated with your ATS or your ATS is super old school and they won't work with us, you would use our smart CSV feature to again, upload that data and have it categorized in our dashboard without doing too much manual work. So that's how we would work with ATS.
Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think uh, the out-of-the-box solutions where you've got APIs already in place with some ATS systems are great. I think harking back to what I was saying before, for staffing companies to have a good plan about how this will work before they embark on it, because you're not only getting data from ATS systems, that data is being updated constantly. It can be updated from the mobile phone if that's enabled, so people can manage their profiles. So you're going to get inputs from there as well, and then of course you've got inputs from multiple TNA systems. So the whole integration component, feedback from staffing firms as they found it difficult, and it can. And Kirsty mentioned there, if you've got old legacy systems in place, it's tough. But having a good plan to modernize that, and then once you start to bring modern technology into the stack with prepackaged prepackaged APIs and a much more open architecture, you'll get better results and it will be much easier to manage. So so that's what I would that's what I would say about integration. It can be complex and difficult, but the more modern the technology, the easier it becomes with good planning.
Perfect. So I have another question here, prefaced by saying we have a lot of clients these days who are requiring job order splits on their invoicing, which requires our timesheets to come in mirrored that way to pair. So does Zeal have any partners for the billing side?
We do a little bit of work in billing, so would love to kind of dive into that use case maybe one-on-one at a later time. But something that we do a really good job of just within our infrastructure on the timesheet front and on the payroll front is making sure you know what shifts are associated with which client, which is a really, really important concept in staffing, right? That example that I showed earlier, you might have one particular worker working for a multitude of your customers in a particular week at different rates of pay, and you need to know exactly which shift was associated with which client for compliance as well as for your billing operations. So we definitely help our customers on that client code categorization, and we do a little bit of work on the billing side to help our customers route funds, and then also have recommended vendors for of course billing as well that we partner with.
Gotcha. So what are some unique things that employers are doing to enhance the employee experience through payroll? It's also a brand experience, right?
Absolutely. So kind of to the employee experience point, what we do for a lot of our staffing companies is help them to develop their own white labeled mobile app. So we have this pre-developed template. It's very configurable. You can say, I do want I-9 or I don't want I-9. I do want to do onboarding or I don't want to do onboarding through this flow. We configure that white labeled mobile app and bring it to the App Store and help our staffing companies launch that. And yeah, I think part of it is a branded experience. Your user knows exactly where they can find their pay stubs, exactly where they can find information, exactly where they can update that. I think that's pretty unique. A couple other things that we're helping and we're doing with our customers is digital wallets and cards, which is, again, bringing that experience a little bit more native and having your financial wellness products as well as your pay stubs kind of in the same direction. So those are some unique things that I'm starting to see customers doing in the market.
Do you have anything to add to that, Kevin?
No, I'd agree with that. It's those extra things that you can leverage from once you have the attention of people on an app. So yeah, those extra products. Of course, that we talked about the daily pays, but all that all that transparency around payroll is not always there in all the apps. So all that's quite kind of innovative when you tie it into the whole onboarding process, that kind of been able to fill in forms and then been able to onboard, been able to pick up shifts very easily, and then to have full transparency about around the pay, get paid whenever people want to be paid in whichever schedule they choose, and then having those extra products. I think that kind of completes a whole cycle, and it's kind of great to be able to see that, because that's the expectation that the modern worker has, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So got another question here about, can payroll automation calculate commissions splits?
Yes, it can. It's the simple answer, but there's more in there, but yes, it can.
Yes, it can. Do you want to elaborate at all?
Well, I think with a lot of our industry, something that I love about our software is we actually work with a multitude of companies across entertainment, healthcare, every industry in between, people that have unionized workers. And something that I love is we help our customers really map um, what they are paying out their workers, or what it's industrially called in their industry, and then we map that to the taxable earning component. So you can call something like a kit reimbursement, or you can call a particular field something and make sure that it's taxed correctly. So there's a lot of things that we help our customers on in terms of industry names mapping out to tax names, and also in terms of auto-calculating and categorizing those earnings properly. Commission is like a whole topic that maybe I could dive into one-on-one on a call,
Uh,
but we definitely have automation around commission calculations.
Well, one thing I'd point out here is that the difference between a kind of standard payroll system and something that's designed specifically for the industry is that in staffing you get every single possible combination of things that you have to do in payroll and commissions and etc. And then the example of billing previously, you get every single combination of billing that customers want. So I think when looking at upgrading a payroll, some companies look at the kind of standard payrolls that are available in the market. The ones that really work are the ones that are designed for staffing companies and with staffing companies in mind, and that cater for all of those variations, like having commission and splits and all sorts of, because you'll find every single combination, I'm sure.
Mhm. Great. So I have a very broad one, and it's, in a technology webinar, we've gotten this far without really talking about AI, but one question is how AI is impacting payroll. And I think, it's probably a pretty long answer, but you have a few big takeaways?
Totally. I think obviously I've been at all the staffing conferences. We'll be again at SIA Gig and healthcare. So would love to meet any of you guys that are there. And I see a lot of talk about AI as it relates to recruitment. I think AI will find its way into payroll, but I do want to draw the distinction between AI and just good software. So just good software, like partnering up with a modern payroll provider, will allow you to automate things like gross nets, tax filings, child support garnishments, payments, automation of tax reporting. That's just good software, modern software. That's what is going to help you to save time and money without AI per se. Our investments for AI, our primary investment for AI, I would say, is related to two parts. One is CSVs. We know that our staffing customers will use all sorts of software. Maybe you have an ATS and an accounting software and a billing software that you really like that's not interconnected into this tool, but you need to find a way to get information in and out of that system in a very streamlined way. And you want to save your time in editing fields. So that's something that AI is really good at. AI is really good at data categorization, reformatting data in the way that makes sense, finding fuzzy matches, letting you know, hey, you've already onboarded this employee before. Please don't re-onboard them so you have duplicate profiles. That's the stuff that AI can really solve in payroll and things that we're investing in. A little teaser for some future AI stuff that we're going to work on is PDF parsing. So these are things like child support garnishments. Some of our staffing companies get hundreds of child support garnishment orders every single week, depending on their scale. How can we help you to sort and know exactly what the fields are without you having to read the letter and type in every variable? Those are a couple other investments that we're making in AI that I think will be helpful, especially on the operational side.
Kevin, I know you've given this a little thought.
Yeah, I have, and we've done some research again with vendors, and as Curtis said, a lot of the focus on AI goes the recruitment side of things, but I think in the back office it certainly has applications. And one of the interesting points that came up was looking at something what called directive AI. So basically AI looking across all of the things that are happening in payroll and then pointing out where a person needs to intervene, particularly if something doesn't look correct or something hasn't been completed, and it can handle going and asking for the information to be completed or letting someone know that there's an intervention needed at this particular point. So that kind of error handling, and then around predictive analytics, looking at the data that's coming in from payroll, from, let's say, time and attendance, and going out and actively collecting the information, reminding the right people, delegating things. So I think there's opportunities, in payroll for AI. Lots of use cases, I think. Whether they've all been applied yet, I don't think so. But as AI matures, I think you'll see a lot more coming into that whole payroll and billing workflow and all the processes surrounding it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. So let's see. We are running out of time for Q&A, but I have a couple in here that are just pretty quick questions about, Zeal capabilities. So I was just going to kind of run them by you, Kirti.
I'm ready for a speed round.
All right. So is Zeal able to register on behalf of the client in a state?
So we are very good at reminding you for all the registrations that you need to do, and we have a partnership with this wonderful vendor called Middesk that can register for all of your taxes. You give them your information once, and then they'll go ahead and register for all of those taxes. So we really like that partner. They're better at doing that than we would be at doing it in-house, but we are partnered together, so you can use our combined solution to completely automate away knowing what taxes to register for and registration for those taxes.
Can Zeal do employee T&E reimbursement?
Yes.
Do you have receipts on the system?
I think I would have to understand what you mean by receipts, but we have tons of reports and analytics and reports related to probably what you want to get out of there.
Perfect. So at this point, we are rounding out our time here. So I want to go ahead and give another thank you to Kirti and Zeal, who are our sponsor for this webinar. And as Kirti said, if you have any further questions or are looking for more information, you can reach out to her or to Zeal.
Absolutely. And I will just say, I know we're only 4 months away from year end. So if anyone wants to have a conversation about payroll before the end of the year and get some advice, would love to chat. And if not, see you guys at SIA Gig, SIA Healthcare, and pretty much everything else that SIA hosts because we are closely partnered.
We do have SIA resources available to our members. Here's a list of those that have been mentioned in the webinar or are related. If you are interested in becoming an SIA member, please reach out to member services at the email here. As Kirti mentioned, we do have more upcoming conferences. We have Healthcare Staffing Summit in November in Texas this year, and we also have Executive Forum Europe in London. Finally, I want to give you all a thank you for attending today's webinar. Another final thank you to Kirti and to Kevin for really sharing their insights and talking about this topic. As a reminder, copies of the slides and a link to the audio recording will be available within 48 hours following the webinar. And a replay will be available at staffingindustry.com. So like I said earlier, do keep an eye on your email for that to come through. Thank you, everyone, again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.